50,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Well, I'm getting ready to watch a video.
Really? What?
Oh, just some scary movie.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
You sick fucks. You've seen one too many.
I said, don't you blame the movies! Movies don't create psychos! Movies make psychos more creative!
Hello, horror hounds, and welcome to the It Slays podcast. I'm Rowan.
It's Xylia.
And this is the vacuum cleaner bag you should have changed 2 years ago, Mike.
I basically only participate in this podcast so I can hear Mike's witty intro comment.
Well, it's more self-deprecating than anything, but yes, I'll take it.
I feel like I shouldn't laugh there, because then I'm just laughing at your sadness.
Yes, but isn't that what sadness is for? To laugh at it?
That is morbid yet very true.
Morbid yet true. That's my philosophy of life.
16 seconds in, and we've already taken an incredibly dark turn.
The bar is set now. We've got to beat it next week.
I'm sure we are up to the challenge. So, I want to get into asking a question. Actually, before that, how rude of me. How's everyone? Everyone's feeling good? They're excited to be providing another episode to the people.
Yes, we're over the exhaustion of the Halloween season, and now we just start the countdown until the next one.
That's right. No one likes Christmas, so I don't know. Maybe you guys like Christmas.
I hate Christmas.
Oh, perfect.
Always have, always will.
Perfect. Xylia's on the fence.
It's all right.
Xylia would give it a okay rating.
There's a reason I drink through every Christmas.
All right, let's get into the question of the day. I know you guys are anxiously waiting, and I feel like we've really got existential the last few ones, so I'm going to throw you guys a little softball, as they say. So I want to know, out of all the horror movies you've seen in your life, what is your all-time favorite horror villain? It can be a person, a thing, a group of people, but anyone or anything or anybody that is a villain in a horror movie. Let's start with Mike, because I already see that blank look in Xylia's stare where she has no idea. It's like a deer caught in the headlights.
Yeah.
Yes, but one could also argue that this is the, default, resting bitch face, it's resting deer face.
Resting deer eyes.
Okay, so mine, this is tough, but just right off the top of my head, I'm going to say probably the alien from The Thing, John Carpenter, and continued The Thing remake.
Oh, really?
Because it's so fucking stealth and scary as fuck.
That's almost like a Xylia cheat answer, too, because
it's everybody.
It's everybody, and it
Yep.
came in many gruesome forms, but I really like that answer.
And that's why I love it so much. It genuinely creeps me the fuck out, so...
I don't know why, but that just made me really happy. You just seemed really happy about that. You're like, and that's why I love it.
Well, I had
happy.
a moment of panic when you said that, because I was like, my god, there's so fucking many answers. And I would have to actually sit down and think about it, but then that was just the first one that popped in my head, and I was like, damn, that's the one. That's the instinctual, that's the correct answer. It's from my diaphragm.
I was wondering if maybe you were thinking really hard because you wanted to choose the Ouija board from Witchboard, but you didn't know if that counted.
Well, of course it
Witchboard
does.
2, of course.
Really, if I was going to choose anything from Witchboard 2, it would be that wonderful actress/stunt woman's insane hair. That's the real villain of that movie, and by villain I mean style icon.
I love how we're kind of like a 70s Marvel comic book where you have to listen to all the episodes in order to get any of the references.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If you haven't seen every movie and listened to all of our episodes, you're fucked. No, I'm kidding. We love you. Just jump in whenever. It's not going to make any sense anyway, so, you know.
Xylia.
Well, and speaking of Christmas, when I was a kid, after Christmas, my mom would always ask me what my favorite present was, and every single year would tell her I don't pick favorites. And keeping with the tradition of me being a cheater, and the fact I don't like to pick favorites, but somehow you guys always make that the center of, and by you guys, I mean Rowan, always make that the center of this podcast, I'm going to pick a villain that I like at this very moment, because it will change tomorrow if you ask me. And today, my favorite villain is Nicolas Cage in Mom and Dad.
Ooh, that's a good one.
He's fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
Deep cut.
Xylia really hitting those deep cuts. And if you haven't seen Mom and Dad, please do, because it's amazing. Maybe we'll review it at some point.
I hope so.
I always forget that we own it.
The world is our fucking oyster.
I know, right? And I mean, we're definitely going to be doing this till we're like 80.
I think I might also just, along with the OC podcast and whatever other podcast we decided on the other day. Yes, architecture. I think we came up with another one. I think I might do a Nicolas Cage podcast as well.
You know what? I think that would be a really great... whenever we get our act together and finally do like some sort of It Slays podcast giveaway, I think what it should be is people have to answer the question of like, name all the offshoot podcasts we've claimed we're going to start.
Oh, that would be such a good one.
Because I feel like we've named at least 10 of them.
I think for our Patreon, the special exclusive thing should actually not really have anything to do with horror. It should be like our top 5 favorite Nicolas Cage roles.
Our top 5 favorite Summer and Seth scenes.
Oh, yes. Our top 5 favorite doorways in horror movies.
Yes. All these are great.
I already know mine on that, by the way. So anyway, we won't go there. We'll save that for the Patreon.
I also want the listeners to know that we're going to get off the subject of the OC because I'm really emotionally hurt right now because we went to Value Village in Dartmouth. Shout out to Dartmouth. And for $5.99, they had a used copy of the OC board game, and Xylia decided she did not want to purchase it.
I owned it in high school.
Divorce.
I owned it in high school. I've already played it. And I'm living in a room right now, guys. I only have so much space. I think it would be hilarious to do like a top 5 something OC for Patreon, because only people that actually listen to this would like get it. They might not like it, but they'd get it.
Well, we could invite our listeners to find their own 20-year-old copies of that in a thrift store in some random podunk dollar store thrift shop, and then we could all do a Twitch stream and play it together.
Oh, that'd be hilarious.
That would be amazing.
Next year, 2020.
So I'll be honest, I'm really thrown off now because I thought Xylia's answer to my question was going to be very cut and dry. I knew when I thought of the question.
Do you know me?
I was like, I know what she's going to say, so I'm going to make sure I don't say that.
What was I going to say?
So I already had one in my head that I was going to pick.
What?
And now I'm like, but that's kind of also one of my favorites. So I'm going to go with, since Xylia didn't, I thought for sure Xylia was going to pick Candyman.
Well, yeah, for sure. He's definitely up there.
100%. So I am going to say Candyman because...
Tony Todd.
Yeah, Tony Todd. That goddamn sexy voice.
That'll be my favorite one tomorrow.
Enough said. Shout out to Candyman 2, starring Kristen.
I was going to say Kelly Rowan.
Yeah, Kelly Rowan.
What was your name in the OC?
Kirsten.
I said
How
Kristen.
dare you?
Oh my god.
As somebody
Kirsten
who has
Cohen.
a family member named Kirsten, they will cut you for not pronouncing it right.
I apologize, horror listeners, for screwing up the name of an OC character.
Yeah, you better.
You should know better. I'm just saying.
I should. You would think I would, but I never learn. All right, let's get into it. The main event. I was gonna try to really drag that out and have a big grandioso introduction, but yet again, listeners, I failed you there. The movie 1976 is the year. Xylia, Mike, we always argue who's gonna say the movie. I think you two should say it together. What movie is it?
Carrie at a margarita, Ruby Cogworthy White.
Whoa.
What?
Xylia is seriously confused. Yes, Carrie. You know what? Let's just get in the trailer and we will come back with the bio and get into what I figure many will consider a iconic horror film. I feel like I've been saying that a lot.
You have been saying that a lot.
We've been doing a lot of iconic horror films lately. So let's get in the trailer and we'll be right back.
It's the night of the senior prom. The Bates High School gym is alive with excitement. Everybody is there, even Carrie White. The girl no one likes.
We're all sorry about this incident, Cassie.
It's Carrie!
And everyone makes fun of her. The girl who lives in that creepy house with her crazy mother.
Help the sinning woman see the sin of her days and ways. Show her that if she had remained sinless, the curse of blood would never have come on her.
The girl with the strange power.
If I concentrate hard enough, I can move things.
But tonight, no one will laugh at Carrie.
If you don't have a date for the prom next Friday, would you like to go with me?
She's with the best-looking boy in the senior class.
He's trying to trick me again.
She'll be voted queen of the prom.
You know, I can make sure that you don't hurt Carrie White anymore.
For Carrie, it will be a dream come true. For everyone else, it will be a nightmare. Carrie. A new film by Brian De Palma. Based on the chilling bestseller. Starring Sissy Spacek, Piper Laurie, and introducing John Travolta in his first motion picture role. If you have a taste for terror, you have a date with Carrie.
So that was the trailer that obviously I have cut in and neither of these guys have seen.
Oh no, we know it's sexy. We know it's a sexy trailer.
It's
because
definitely
this is
sexy.
a sexy movie. It's
There's so many things wrong with that comment,
Yes.
I feel. Let's get into the bio. Our good friend IMDb. It says, Carrie White, a shy, friendless teenage girl who is sheltered by her domineering religious mother, unleashes her telekinetic powers after being humiliated by her classmates at her senior prom. So, I want to know, what is everyone's experience with this movie? Have you seen it before? Is this your first time? Let us know. Mike.
I read the book when I was 12, because that's what well-adjusted 12-year-olds do. Or at least I think. Maybe that's just me rationalizing the trauma I inflicted on myself. But anyway, yes, so I read the book, and then shortly thereafter, I saw the movie on late-night TV. But a key aspect of this is that it was not cable TV, it was network TV. So I watched it late at night, thinking, I was seeing this cool-ass adaptation of Stephen King and, being very edgy. Which of course I was, but actually the first few times I saw it when I was, a youngster, was on TV at various points, and they cut the shit out of that. I mean, think of that whole opening scene.
Not surprising.
It's all like tits and bush, and Carrie White eats shit written everywhere, and people, and it was essentially the opening credits. I actually remember it because the first time I saw like an actual full uncut version of the movie, I was like almost horrified. I was like, I've seen this several times, and I didn't know that like the whole opening credits was just nudity. Like it was so soft and like foggy and cut perfectly. So, I mean, the whole thing is cut out. You don't see anybody's name. It was like the first 2 seconds, and then it cuts to, directed by Brian De Palma, because it's like, we can't show you any of this movie. There's no way to cut it so that, there is not going to be nudity and, that full 70s pubic hair flashing all over the place. God love it.
There
So
was
yes,
a
and then I've
lot.
seen it 20,000 times since then because I worship it, and everybody I know loves it. It's sort of a tradition to watch every couple of years. Get drunk and watch Carrie.
Xylia.
Well, actually, my first encounter with Carrie was the one that came out in the early 2000s. I was 13 and it was on television, and I think it might have recently came out. And I, at the time, really enjoyed that one. And then later on, years later, I, saw this original one. And I think I only saw it once. But I really like Carrie. Both of them. I mean, I don't know. I'll have to revisit the other one.
You won't know how much you liked it until we get to the rating.
No, I mean, I don't know if I still, would like the one that came out in the early 2000s. But this one I really like.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a surprise, but I'll rate it, though.
I'm usually, we shame Xylia, but I'm going to be the shameful one here. Until now, have never fully watched this movie. I know.
I would like to point out that I'm essentially Carrie on this podcast, and you are the Mean Girls.
But can I just interject and say, I will give you that, but I'm I'm Sue because I mean it first, and then I try to make up for it. Whereas Ro is full on Nancy Allen, Chris Hargensen right here.
Yeah, 100% Chris, and sitting right here. But yeah,
or maybe I'm John Travolta. I don't know.
Great.
How are we gonna get?
I hope you don't smack me around.
Oh my god, I know. We'll have to get to that.
We'll get to that.
We'll get to the smacking around of Rowan.
So yeah, I've seen bits and parts of it. I mean, obviously, I feel like even if you're not really aware of the film, everyone's kind of seen, the iconic scene in it. But I've seen bits and parts of it on TV, I think it used to play late at night on the Space Channel and stuff.
Yeah, I feel like that's where I saw it.
Yeah, but I've never, rented it. I never fully watched it. So I can't really say it was ever on my radar until I was older, and then I was more aware of how iconic it was, and it was just a movie I never just forced myself to watch. So, I mean, that was my experience with it. I figured, I liked how we did it last episode. I figured this is where we could briefly talk about, Brian De Palma and who's in it and that kind of stuff. Just throwing segments that I'm making up in there. So I thought it was definitely worth noting, if we hadn't said it already, directed by Brian De Palma.
Fucking king of my life.
Yeah, and you know what? Brian De Palma, it's one of those names where I know for me, I don't know anyone else, but he's this legendary director, but I never necessarily
know what he directed.
Dude, I could rattle off every movie in his fucking canon right now.
Tell us a couple others.
Yeah, tell us some. I have a list, but please tell us some of your favorites.
Blow Up, Sisters, Obsession, Snake Eyes, Femme Fatale. I could literally just keep going. How dare you?
I've never heard of any of them.
So the couple I wrote down, Mike has the classic De Palma list. I guess I was thinking more mainstream.
Oh, Untouchables.
So he directed Scarface.
Okay, yeah.
The Untouchables, Carlito's Way.
Classic. But that's his Scorsese period.
Yeah, Mission Impossible.
The first one, the best one.
The first one.
It's nothing like the rest of the movies.
I've never seen Carlito's Way. The only thing I know of it is On Love. When that guy's friend's weird band that makes up songs according to movies, and they kept doing it about Carlito's Way.
Yeah, I've seen it. I like it. It's a classic, like Mike said, that Scorsese period, gangster
when
flicks.
Gangster movies were sort of canon as high art for 6 or 7 years, I think.
Yeah. Not so much Carlito Ways 2, which I'm sure he had nothing to do with. I just know it starred Puff Daddy, so take that as it may. The only other two I had of note were the Black Dahlia.
Oh, love it.
Yeah, I've
love
seen that.
it.
And then one I have not seen, but I'm very, very hopeful, and I feel like eventually we will get to it, is Phantom of the Paradise.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
that
That would be very good to do. Also, Passion was a recent one, and Mission to Mars. Like, hello.
Yes, Mission to Mars.
Mission to Mars. Like, that's one of those that's really underrated. And Dress to Kill is one of my favorite. Like The Fury, Body Double. We need to do Body Double. That's 100%. Frankie Goes to Hollywood's Relax video, like, done in full in the middle of the movie. It's peak 80s.
So as you can see, Mike is very excited.
I told you, he's like one of the kings of my life. Like, this is one man whose filmography was like, he was one of the first directors that like I actually paid attention to when I was watching a movie. I was like, oh my god, like it's the same guy that directed whatever. And I had not really paid attention, and I was a youngster, and I was just like, I like all the movies that this guy's directed, so I'm going to start like actually, you know, trying to watch them. So I can't help it. I have like a huge soft spot. Or a hard spot, depending on how you look at it.
And speaking of peak 80s, have you watched any of American Horror Story 1984?
Yes, I'm almost caught up.
Okay, so we've only seen one episode so
And by
far.
one episode, she means we've only seen 10 minutes of one episode.
I've seen the whole episode.
I didn't. We went to sleep.
Oh, okay, whatever. We saw several minutes. Anyways, that doesn't matter. The introduction is possibly the greatest introduction I've ever seen.
And that's really saying something, because American Horror Story has consistently for like the last 10 years had the best theme songs and opening credit scenes of any TV show. I know everyone's like, oh, Game of Thrones and shit. Like, no, fuck that. That's like, you know, insane bajillions of dollars HBO shit. Like, they consistently, and every season, it's radically different. You know, there's not like, oh, look, there's an extra bridge or tower on there. Like, no. And you are so right, because every season they outdo themselves, even if the season itself is subpar, which most of them aren't. But, you know, there's a couple that could have used a bit more work. But the opening credits and the opening music is always just stellar, out of the park. And this season is just everything.
That's like, I wouldn't skip the intro, and I do that to a lot of intros. It's just like such a night, like I just love watching it.
Yeah, it's so perfectly done. The images, the music,
perfect.
Yeah,
it's perfect.
It's our preferable aesthetic.
Oh, it is. Well, come on, like 80s slasher, fucking workout vibe.
Yeah.
Anything referencing a Jamie Lee Curtis movie, horror or otherwise, from the early to mid 80s.
That's right. So I figure let's also talk about like the cast.
Let's just talk about what's her name, PG Souls.
Oh fuck!
Because do you know how many times Rowan reminded me that that's who it was while we were watching this movie? At least six. At least six times.
Linda,
I was like,
I
know.
That's Linda from Halloween. She does look fairly different, though.
No, he was like, what's her name? PJ or PG?
PG. We're making up letters now.
PJ. No, he kept being like, that's PJ Souls. And I was like, yeah, I know. After the 16th time.
And I will say, so speaking of her, we love her. Obviously, she was in several of, you know, the horror movies, like capital T, capital H of all time, especially slasher movies. But when we were rattling off the couple of things she's been in, like horror-ish and cultish last episode, we did not say one of her literal greatest roles, and probably one of the only times she was ever the lead in a movie, Rock and Roll High School. I just had to throw that out there, because if you're watching horror movies, you probably love cult movies, and if you've never seen Rock and Roll High School...
Like the
Ramones. Oh my fucking god.
I think that's where I had recognized
her. She's Riff Randall. Like, she's Riff Randall.
Yes.
Yeah, I had written down the notables, obviously Halloween. She played one of the moms in Jawbreaker.
Yeah, Devil's Rejects.
And the Devil's Rejects is really what I thought of when I think of her. Such a good movie. But yeah, like the cast is just like incredible in this.
It truly is. Like, it's the cream of the crop.
And like great kind of like horror ties for everyone. Piper Laurie, who played Carrie's mom, was in Twin Peaks. And The Faculty,
which is so underrated. Yeah,
I know. I love The Faculty.
I fucking hate that movie.
So we know if we ever review it, what Xylia is gonna rate it now, obviously. That look.
Let's hope we don't have to.
Any movie that introduced me to Clea Duvall is going to be tops in my book, I'm just saying.
I don't know who that is.
Xylia's got no
But
idea.
I'm a cheerleader? Oh, anyway, go ahead.
What? But I'm a cheerleader?
Yes, she was...
She's in that.
Who's she playing that?
The love interest of Natasha Lyonne.
She's in, like, every 90s movie.
Yeah.
Okay, I know who you're talking about now.
Amy Irving, who plays Sue Snell. She, notable, she was in Carrie 2, The Rage.
I can't. No, I promised myself I wouldn't talk about Carrie 2. And I'm not going to.
Well, maybe sometime we'll review Carrie 2.
She was also in another brilliant Brian De Palma movie, The Fury, which I believe was like a year after this.
Yeah, I believe so. Mike had briefly brought up Nancy Allen, who was the first person I recognized in the movie, because I absolutely love the RoboCop movie.
Of course, yeah.
And she was the, other than RoboCop, she was the franchise, and also in Poltergeist 2.
Poltergeist 3. The
was
best
it 3?
One of it. It was 3. It was the It was the
Yeah.
one in the apartment building, the high rise.
The one that I talk about, and the guy at the window. And actually, I saw a picture of that guy yesterday. Just randomly came up on like some article I was reading, and I was like, ugh. I was traumatized. It was really bringing me back to being scared as a child.
It's terrifying.
He's so creepy looking.
I agree. I agree.
So the other two I wanted to bring up, one was an actor. He didn't really do much after this. It was his first film. This guy named John Travolta. I don't even know what else he's in.
Oh, isn't he the star of that movie Battlestar? No, not Battlestar.
How dare you?
What's that one?
Battlefield Earth.
Battlefield
Yeah,
Earth.
right.
How dare you put down Ron L. Hubbard's
You mean
leg?
L. Ron Hubbard?
It was L. Oh dear lord!
He completely
Scientology's coming after us.
John Travolta completely funded that movie by himself, and I think it's been on like at least 100 worst movie lists I've watched before.
I think he funded it by doing lewd massages. Anyway, sorry, cut that out. I'm legitimately going to have Scientology like kidnapping me in the night.
A couple Christmases ago, Rowan and I like had a bunch of time off work, and we just sat on our couch for like at least 4 days and just watched every single YouTube documentary / video we could possibly ever watch on Scientology.
That sounds like you truly hated yourselves for those 4 days.
It was so interesting.
It's very interesting.
And then we expanded into just cults in general. It was great.
But yeah, I feel like we don't need a list.
We need more horror cult movies.
Oh, yeah, I know. Bring out more cult movies.
Those would be scary.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm not listing John Travolta movies. Everyone knows Saturday Night Fever, Pulp Fiction.
I'm not gonna get into it, but there's a rumor there's a cult in our town.
Oh my.
I'm not gonna say any more, but...
No, because again, you do not want to get kidnapped in the middle of the night and wake up tied to some railway track somewhere.
We're not going to say that because we're going to make a podcast about the cult.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Anybody paying attention to the Easter eggs, this is offshoot podcast number 74. Cults in Atlantic Canada.
That will be like exactly one episode.
One episode. one 5-minute episode.
So I think the last person, the most important person to talk about that was in this film, Sissy Spacek.
Oh, Queen. Okay, before we say anything, this is literally all I ever have to say on Carrie, and we might as well honestly stop the podcast now, because this is all I have to say about this movie. The fact that she didn't get a fucking Oscar for this is absolute, like, tragedy, homophobia, like, misogyny, everything. It's, I can't know, like, history explodes in my head when I think about it.
And that's an important thing to kind of bring up, is that, this was a huge role for her, And her and Piper Laurie, I believe, they both got Oscar nods.
They did.
For this, which, I mean, even now is very rare, but was even
more
rare back then for horror. And Sissy Spacek has been in a million things.
I mean, and now, listen, like, I know that she got an Oscar eventually for also The Brilliant Coal Miner's Daughter, but... And how dare you just say she's been in a million things. She should have won for Carrie. She did win for Coal Miner's Daughter. But every time I watch this movie, I'm like, she is so fucking nuanced. And she is so charming. And yet, you know, when she's murdering people, even though they were complete and utter fucking terrors that kind of deserve to die, you know, she also has that, like, villainous... She's just so nuanced. And she's such a charming, like, beautiful... soul. And so she's just so, like, naive, and she sells that, like, innocence, but she, like, you know, you could see her, like, as the movie progresses, like, awakening in terms of, like, her social life and her surroundings, and she wants to fit in, and she wants to get, and she knows that there's this world that her mother has cut her off from, and, you know, she wants to go out and be a part of it, and, like, you just very subtly see her, like, change her mannerisms and stuff, and I just, like, it's criminal that she didn't get an Oscar for it. Like, I don't give a shit who won that year, and I don't know. It was hers. It was hers. It was fucking robbery, so whoever fucking got that Oscar, go bust into Sissy Spacek's house and put it on her goddamn mantelpiece, because that's where it belongs. Scratch your name off of it with a goddamn nickel or something.
Mike is serious about this.
I have 2 random facts about Sissy Spacek.
Please, do tell.
1, she's cousins with Rip Torn.
Oh, love him.
And 2, her first role was actually in a movie produced by Andy Warhol called Women in Revolt.
Oh, that's actually very interesting.
It was a minor role, but
it was still Andy Warhol.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also going to add just 2 other movies I was thinking of note. I was trying to think, like, I mean, everything she's in is kind of big. But what popped out to me was JFK.
Of course,
Oliver Stone. And more recently, she's in Castle Rock. I haven't watched that yet, but I have expressed to Xylia that I would like to start watching it.
Okay, so Rowan was like, we were at his parents' house the other morning, and we woke up, and he's like, oh, I really want to watch Castle Rock, and he's explaining it to me, and it's like a Stephen King universe, blah, blah, blah. And then we went down for breakfast, and then I was like, hey, what's that show you really want to watch? And it's like Castle Rock. And there was a bag of grapes sitting on the table, and it was called from Castle Rock Vineyards.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, whoa, they're part of the grapes from the Stephen King universe.
Is there some kind of Castle Rock cult going on? Or
that's not the cult.
What's going on here? So what do you say, guys? I say we get into reviewing it. But before we review it, I want to briefly tell everyone about Spotify. So if you're on Spotify, we just wanted to let everyone know to go check out the It Slays podcast horrific playlist. We have music from horror movies, the soundtracks that could be the soundtrack of your life. We say every episode we're going to add new songs.
Yeah, hopefully you only live for an hour.
So we are definitely going to make sure that we add more. So yeah, if you're on Spotify, go follow it and send us some suggestions. We're always up for suggestions so that we can add a couple more hours to your life.
I'm sorry, I just find Spotify very confusing, but when I figure it out, I promise I will add more to it.
It's a good thing we don't have a Spotify sponsorship, because
well, I mean, if they want
the first
to
thing they would
sponsor
tell us
us
is
and give me a free
Mike.
premium membership, please, Spotify, hit me up. My email can be found out very easily.
Mike, if you still have your school email, you can sign up and get it for $4.99.
I do, but I can't get into it because I don't remember the password.
Oh.
The struggle is real. All right, it's time to get into the meat and potatoes of this thing. We know what we're starting with. Favorite scenes. Favorite anything, really. Xylia.
Why do I always have to be...
You're never first, but you look confused, so I decided to ask you.
I'm really thinking about it. There's so many good scenes I gotta think about.
So as always, we're gonna divert this to Mike, because this happens every episode where I ask Xylia She accuses me of picking her first every time, and then we go to Mike. So
we should
Mike,
just start going to Mike.
Start us off.
We will default to me. It's okay. I have many. And I want to say a particular one, but I'm actually going to say a subsection of a scene, of my favorite scene, and that is, the prom scene is obviously my jam. But every aspect of this movie is so technically well done and brilliant that it really took my breath away, and it really kind of gave me my aesthetic for not only horror films but films in general for years to come, because it was one of the first kind of good movies that I ever watched when I was a youngster. Something that always stuck with me, and I think I even wrote a poem about it once when I was in high school, was, and by think I mean I did, I just don't want anybody to judge me because it was stupid, but the scene at the prom when they're just dancing, and it's just that the camera's kind of spinning around them and they're just dancing and talking, and it goes on for 4 minutes. I think it's such a beautiful, brilliant scene, and you know what's coming, even if you've never seen it before, because you know the setup. He's done the Hitchcock thing already. He's shown you the bomb in the bag under the counter, you know it's going to explode. So now he just gives you that 10 minutes of, when is that bomb of blood going to explode? When is the telekinetic bomb going to let loose? But you get this tender moment between the two of them, and you kind of he's so nuanced, Tommy, as a character, and he's a little tiny bit of a piece of shit, obviously, but he's also a caring guy, and I think he's just a nuanced kind of jockey character. But it's this just really wonderful moment between the two of them, and I think that he actually cares for her and sees her as a human being and not as this fucking joke, this graffiti scrawled on the wall, and it's just, what's going to happen, so you just see this moment, and it's this is her only moment, this is her last moment, and it's just so beautiful, and I think it's my favorite part of the whole movie, honestly. And it's kind of corny because it's done very 70s. The song is very 70s, the camera work is very 70s, as brilliant as it is, but the whole setup, the hair, 70s. the dresses, the god-awful tuxedos, don't even get me started. But I just it always warms my heart, and it's heartwarming and yet wrenching at the same time, right? Because she gets her moment, but it's also, this is just immediately going to turn to shit, and literally it's going to be a bloodbath.
I thought it was interesting that he kissed her multiple times.
Yeah.
That was really going above and beyond just taking her to the prom as a favor to his girlfriend.
Yeah, that was kind of bizarre. Especially, it was even weirder that she was there watching.
Yeah. Well, he kissed her at the table too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but we all know clearly Sue sneaks in. She likes to watch. She knew what was going to happen. She likes to watch. Sue is a fucking voyeur. Let's face it. And frankly, let's also face this, which was, if you've read the book, and now I read it several times, but again, when I was quite young. I haven't read it in a while, so maybe the details are a bit blurry to me in all of my, voluminous Stephen King reading. But I feel in the book, she's a bit more, kind of physically dowdy and unattractive, and, they kind of, because in the movie, she's just sort of plain and unassuming, but,
well, at the prom, she's really beautiful.
Yeah, and even when when she's dolled up, she's actually gorgeous. But even when she's supposed to be very mousy and, this, outcast, you would never call Sissy Spacek, traditionally beautiful, which to me, fuck that. Who wants to be traditionally beautiful anyway? But she has this, almost alien gorgeousness to her, and, her eyes, and, that her freckles are beautiful, and her hair and everything. And, the whole movie, she's gorgeous. So, frankly, I don't blame him for when he's, kind of forced into this, role that, maybe he's not performing as much as actually living it. Yeah. In spite of himself, maybe.
Yeah, no, and I was going to say, kind of riffing off of you, because I feel my favorite scenes also kind of, I feel almost it's cop-out, because I feel it's everyone's favorite scene, is that whole prom scene. As someone who has only ever seen it out of context of this film, so this being my first time watching it, I was just very impressed with it all. I wasn't expecting much going in. I knew this was the 70s. I didn't know what kind of budget this film was. So I was just kind of like, oh, you know, it's probably going to be something like super cheesy, and it's just, you know, kind of going to be stupid now that I reflect on it now. But I thought everything there was like really effective, and especially like as the camera, like as they do the split screen stuff, and we get to see Sissy Spacek, like her eyes, just like when she's looking at objects, she's moving. But yeah, like wow on just, I mean, really wow on her performance of that. Like I thought she did such an amazing job where, you know, it seems, even though it's probably only a couple minutes, like it seems so long that her face is like in this horror, but like zero expression. Like,
oh yeah, it's like she's
really
dead
moving
inside.
Her mouth. Yeah. Everything is going on with her
Deer eyes.
Resting deer eyes. And yeah, like it's just like, man, that's gonna take like acting chops to be able to really do a scene like that with just your eyes. Because I think about when she's being mousy and stuff, like you can tell like, to portray this, like, she's using her voice and her body language.
Yeah, her body, like I was calling, curls in on itself, you know? Like, she doesn't want to be seen.
Like, slumped over.
Yeah, where, like, to create this horror for the audience and the people in the movie, like I said, she literally just has her eyes.
Yeah.
And she's only using her eyes. And, that scene just, like, blew me away at how good that was.
And her eyes are so strikingly blue in that scene specifically.
But, like, and that's sort of one of the things that I love about that scene is also the lighting. Mm-hmm. Like, the lighting is just insane. And, like, even when they're doing the split screen, it's like the lighting is just crazy on each, like, screen. And it's like, no matter what angle you're looking at, it's like red or blue or orange or whatever. And it's, fuck.
I love the split screen.
He's the only person who's ever, like, really done it that well.
I was gonna say that, like, it's not something that you really see that often, but it was done really well.
Yeah. He, oof. Like, just, it tears you in half, man. Like, that split screen, the two images really does rip you in half.
At first, it kind of, like,
double
jarred.
The action.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, double the action. At first, it kind of, like, jarred me, because I did not know that scene had, like, the split screen in it.
Yes, because you know the setup of it through pop culture, because it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's referenced so often over, like, the last 40 years or whatever, but, like, holy shit, like, the split screen, because you can't even parody it, because it's so well done, and so iconic, and so singular, that it's just, parodying it just doesn't cut the mustard, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, for that whole, like, what is it? 10 minutes or I never timed it, but like it feels like an hour, but you know, you get this like semiotic, like sensory overload. There's just so much happening and yet so little at the same time. Like stuff is happening in one screen, but it's like literally the other one is just her fucking like demon eyes, you know?
Yeah, it was just so effective. Like I said, at first it kind of jarred me, but then like I was just like, I'm living for this. I love this. It's so well done. I was also gonna bring up, like, I love the scene where we have, like, the final confrontation with her and her mother.
Oh, fuck.
Like, I love because at first I didn't clue into it until, was it you, Xylia? I can't remember. Where, like, the knives started stabbing into her, and it's like, oh, that's the, like, statue.
Mom.
Yeah, we watched this with Xylia's parents. And her mom brought up that, like, oh, the knives are stabbing her, like,
that Weird Al Jesus.
Yeah, we did comment while we watched that their Jesus looks like an action figure of Weird Al. Not so much like a Jesus action figure, but...
It really...
Jesus action figure? I think it was just like...
action figure. Yes, that's what they use in church. They go, oh my goodness, look, everybody pray before the Jesus action figure with his... he comes with opposable arms and a stand and a removable cross, and he also comes armed with an extra cloak and nails that you can remove or put into his hands.
Oh, God.
Someone make this now.
Complete the set by getting, the 12 disciples and
yeah, Rowan.
Mary Magdalene sold separately.
They had this huge picture of the Last Supper, and Rowan was like saying something, and he was like telling me a joke about the First Supper, and I was like, "What the fuck's the First Supper?"
It's a beautiful tapestry, though. I actually kind of love it. Like, I actually wrote a note saying that the First Supper tapestry really pulls their whole, like, dining room aesthetic together.
One time we bought a huge, like, paint by number scene of the Last Supper at Value Village because we were going to do a craft with it, but we ended up not, and then we gave it away when we moved. Fun story.
Fun fact. I was gonna say, really, like, all scenes are notable that had Piper Laurie in them. Like, her mother was played so well.
So before you get to, like, your 5th favorite scene, can I tell you mine?
Yeah, sorry. I was getting really excited.
Spiraling down into the abyss of Ro's favorite scenes, which is just describing every scene of the movie.
Let me tell you the beginning of the movie all the way to the end.
So my favorite scene was the one in the shower because I just thought it, like, was so dramatic and, like, really set up the whole story. And as someone who, like, grew up as a girl, like, that was very much like girls can really, like, gang up on somebody, like, intensely like that. And I just felt like they brought an authentic energy to that scene.
Well, it's funny. It's like like the blood. It's like they're sharks.
I know, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah. They smell, like, they go for the blood, like, you know, they smell it figuratively or like literally, depending on the situation. I'm sure
it was probably a tangy smell.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Listen, I mean, we all know what blood smells like. It's a very like tart smell, and you know, it was a very, very steamy locker room. Like, you know, that shit wafted like that. Osmosis through or diffused through the
my god.
Go ahead.
I was also quite disturbed about all the waste created by the tampons and pads and stuff. I was like looking at the pile in the corner of the shower and I was like, oh, that's so much garbage.
Okay, I need to ask you a question though. Xylia. My experience with pads is very limited, obviously, but are they generally that big? Because that was like a pair of underwear.
Yeah, they're big because they have to they cover your whole underwear.
Yes. Okay. I mean, I just listen. The only like tampons is like what I knew.
Oh, okay, that's okay.
You don't have to explain about your knowledge of tampons and pads. It's okay, man.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know anything either.
You know more than
I try to be an ally. I want to know about like the horrific aspects of, you know.
They they fit over the underwear, so they have to be like bigger, much bigger than the tampons. I also liked how everybody was already like had the tampons out of the wrapper and pads out of the wrapper, like they were expecting her to randomly get her period for the first time in the shower and not know about it. So I thought that was interesting. It seemed like a whole like orchestrated harassment campaign. And then another more lighthearted scene I really liked was, so the PJ Souls girl, she always wears that red hat, which is actually her hat, and she wore it to audition, and then he told her to like bring it to filming. And when she's getting ready for prom, and she has like that old school hair dryer from the dresser place, and she has the hat on top of it. I thought it was fucking hilarious.
But I'm glad that you brought up the hat, because I want to talk about for a moment how I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that I guess now, because of PJ Souls herself, Norma is definitely a like OG, very low key LGBTQ plus icon. First of all, deaf tomboy. The hat itself, of course,
the matching red overalls.
Yep, the overalls, the like weird motorcycle t-shirts. Weirdly, the gum chewing also kind of did it for me. I'm like, lesbian icon. And then on that, you know, insane hat, the like rainbow pins, which I know maybe didn't have the same.
Oh, yeah.
But I was like looking at it and I'm like, she totally, like, in retrospect, I think that we can do a bit of revisionist history here and say that Norma was an LGBTQ plus icon, and that one of the reasons why she got involved with the prank on Carrie is because she wanted to take the heat off of her budding lesbianism. That's my theory. Possible. That's my theory. That's my like conspiracy theory. That's my reading of PJ Soul's performance.
That's very possible. She actually drove me nuts because she was always cackling almost in every scene, like, and it just reminded me of the sister in Evil Dead that's under like the floorboard. Like, she's like, yeah. And yeah, she just did that everything, and it drove me nuts. And I was like, you're so mean, first of all, for doing that, but also it's annoying.
Well, and I was going to say, this is probably a good time, too, to bring up that, you know, I think this film should, and it probably isn't much anymore, be viewed without really reading into it, because there's so much going on, you know, talking about, like, the stuff with the periods and, like, womanhood.
It's almost like almost an entirely female cast as well.
Yeah.
It is. It's kind of like Suspiria in that regard. Like, there's a couple of peripheral, you know, males, but, like, it's by and large, I mean, driven by female characters and, like, female activities and their, like, relationships and stuff. It's very, like...
Female activities are a social construct.
No, and listen, okay, can we please erase what I just said, please?
I know what you mean.
Well, I was just thinking, you know, I was interested because the minute that first scene hits, I'm like, okay, like, there's this messaging about womanhood, and, you know, we don't really know, like, if she had her powers before this, but, like, these powers show up once she's having her period. And then I was, like, kind of thinking, because I was like, oh, you know, that's, like, films that play with this stuff, you know, I think about, like, Ginger Snaps or something like that really are kind of have grown into these, like, cult feminist films. But then I was thinking about it, because I'm like, oh, well, this would have either come from Stephen King, or this would have came from Brian De Palma, and I was thinking, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I know Brian De Palma kind of, throughout his career, has kind of always had that, his main criticism against him has been that his work has always been kind of this patriarchal, like, you know, chauvinist viewpoint, and he's kind of always been viewed as, like, a man's director.
I mean, it's a common, like, cultural narrative that once a girl or whomever gets their period, that's like,
it turns them into the monstrous other.
Exactly.
Yeah. So really, I mean, like, it is obviously a comment on that, because they literally turn them into monsters.
Into a monster, exactly.
Well, and I was gonna say, like, I feel, that kind of viewing where it's like, oh, you know, women have their periods, and then, like...
But then what she ended up getting, like, telekinesis, like, gave her, like, agency, though.
Yeah, her power.
Didn't really have that beforehand.
Her power,
yeah. Well, and that's what I was gonna say, is I think it's interesting how you can really, you know, like any film, like, read it so many different ways. Because as I was thinking about, like, oh, what are some of the problematic things about, like, you know, De Palma or Stephen King or whoever, like, writing about this stuff from a man's perspective, but then being able to read it, like, I think now in 2019 and be like, oh, like, she had her period, and like you said, like, she has this agency, she has, like, this power now, and it's like utilizing that power. And, you know, it's kind of like on the Facebook group, like, I'd posted that article that for some reason stopped working, we don't know why, but I thought it was interesting, like, they were comparing Carrie and Species, and just about, like, you know, using, like, femininity with villains, but, like, also giving this power to femininity.
That's why I really love movies that have witches in it, because it kind of, like, falls into that realm.
Well, and witches are, like, socio-culturally, very specifically, like, female-identified, like, kind of subset. Yeah. Which is so interesting, you know, because it's like you said, you can, the readings of that, like, trope culturally, like, not even talking about, like, the actual practice, like, historical practices and stuff, but that too, obviously, but, like, even just the trope of, like, film and literature and, like, visual art and things like that, like, You're right. It's the same thing. It's like witches are such an interesting, like, you could just spend your whole career studying them.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
Just even from that one angle, you could do that.
There's so many, like, stories and viewpoints you can tell with them.
I mean, look at every Halloween decoration that ever existed. It's a fucking, woman in the pointy hat and stuff. Like, it's never, like, a dude riding a broom. You know what I mean? It's just this very, like, oddly specific but again, and now listen, maybe there's like historical references obviously that I don't know because I'm not studied in this area, and I feel like it actually is, and there's probably like a lot of pagan like ritual and stuff and tradition that I don't know about, but like it's just such an interesting like take on it.
I think like women who historically were like burned at the stake, I think it's because their behavior was outside the norm of like what women, like female behavior was supposed to be like. And like women, basically, like I think a lot of times like witches and stuff, it's like sometimes kind of claiming like your own sexuality, and it's like witches are dangerous, and it's just because it's like a woman with agency and like that's seen as dangerous.
Well, you look at like, for example, it's just so funny because like, this is all encapsulated in, like, Macbeth. Because you've got Lady Macbeth, who is villainized, of course. Mm-hmm. And then you have, like, the witches, and it's all kind of there. Like, that whole, like, from hundreds of years ago, this whole, like, trope and the whole, like, cycle of female agency and, like, owning your sexuality and, like, your power. And, it's all there. It's all laid out for us, like, by Shakespeare.
It's true.
For better or for worse,
I haven't read Macbeth since grade 5, so I should probably read up. But the dry cleaner in the town next to us, when I was growing up, used to have a sign, and it, like, where you put the letters on, and it would always say "Out damn spot."
Oh, brilliant! I love it.
I'll have to revisit Macbeth.
We stan a literate dry cleaner, a clever literate dry cleaner. Like it's funny because like it makes me I always kind of put those things together in my mind in terms of and this is obviously probably just because of the manners in which I came upon them in my life and like my education and stuff, but like two things that I always pair together in my mind are the Crucible and the Scarlet Letter. Like they're always parallel and like a pair in my mind. So I think about like, female sexuality and like witches and the kind of paranoia and the persecution of it all. And that always sort of melts together, those two works. So I just think that's a very interesting point to make.
Maybe this is a good Patreon bonus content starter.
Hit us
yes,
up, bitches. Hit us up.
Very, very much so. But I mean, and that's what I think is kind of, so unique. Well, I shouldn't say unique because there's lots of films like it, but I mean, to me, a great film or an interesting film is one that can bring these kind of conversations where you can just kind of view it as, this originally intended, double feature drive-in horror that kind of becomes like a high art horror and you can have all these different readings of it. And, it just, I think it's what makes it so memorable for so many people is that you can interpret it in like so many different ways. And I started to bring up earlier, and I did want to mention again that, like, I can't think of a non-memorable scene with Margaret White in it. She, like, man, Piper Laurie, like, murdered that role. It was so good.
Oh,
it was so, like...
She ate that whole movie. Like, she just unhinged her jaw and swallowed it fucking whole.
And her and Sissy Spacek, like, the chemistry together was, like, so good. Because at first I was kind of like, man, like, the mom's really over the top. Like, played really, really over the top. But... it just works. Like, it's just amazing.
It does, because Sissy kind of, like, is obviously before the end of the movie, she really downplays a lot because she has to, like, be turned in on herself. So it's just funny because she's turned down to, like, a 1, and Piper Laurie is, like, cranked up to, like, 15. But it works. It works. They're, like, good foils, right? Like, because the daughter is supposed to be meek, and the mother is supposed to be domineering. It's this... the way it is.
The mother is my worst nightmare in a person.
Yeah, I definitely would not want that to be my mother.
I wouldn't even want to be around that person.
Favorite scene, her showing up at Mrs. Snell's house trying to preach the word of the Lord. And then Mrs. Snell going, here's $10, get the fuck out of my house.
Yeah, Mrs. Snell was actually her daughter in the movie is her daughter in real life.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They basically hired her because she was like that girl's mom.
But also, point of reference here, Mrs. Snell is in another one of it. She's in 2 of my favorite horror movies of all time. She's in Carrie, obviously, as Mrs. Snell, and she's in Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors as the fucking bitch doctor.
Oh shit, I forgot about that.
Yeah, like 15 years later. So she's got a lot more gray hair and,
That is her.
Yeah,
wow.
Priscilla Pointer, she's great.
I love no matter how much anyone wants to try to escape horror, they're always sucked back in.
They are, because who doesn't want to be part of a fucking good horror movie, or even a bad horror movie? Even better, a bad horror movie is probably more apt to be discussed. And frankly, no, when you think about it, like, okay, being in a good horror movie gives you like that kind of historical, cultural, artistic clout, but it doesn't necessarily bring in the bucks. Being in a bad horror movie, man, you got that like cult following you online, buying your shit. You go to conventions, which, it's just you're raking in the money, man. You're in a bad horror movie, you're set for fucking life. You were in a bad horror movie in the 70s, like you don't even need to work. Like, you're done. You just do conventions the rest of your life.
Now, you'd probably know better than I do, Mike, as we talk about, you just need to be in bad horror movies, being in horror movies in general. But my impression always of this film was it not kind of a big thing that, like, Sissy Spacek kind of, like, distanced herself from this, didn't she?
I don't really... This is one of those weird things, because I think for the most part, she's not as, like, press immersed as a lot of actors are in general.
Yeah.
Like, I have seen significantly fewer interviews and, like, press kits and stuff and anything with her, and read interviews, like print, anything, than I have with a lot of other actors that I greatly admire. But yeah, I feel like this is one that maybe because it was one of her first roles, and I mean, the one that she did right before this was also another one of my favorite movies of all time, Terrence Malick's Badlands, which is not a horror movie, but it involves serial murder, essentially. So I feel like maybe she did kind of distance herself from those first couple of roles just because they were very dark. And, the rest of her career was not... I mean, there was some darkness, definitely. She actually did a movie, Night Mother, based on a play, which is essentially about this girl who decides she's going to commit suicide, and it's her and her mother all night, like, the mother, like, essentially trying to convince her not to kill herself. But, I mean, that's obviously based on a play, and it's a famous play, it's very literary, and, kind of has that, like, the cred, I guess. But, I don't know, I just feel like she kind of distanced herself from those dark, horrific beginnings. Maybe not on purpose, I don't know. I can't say, but...
Well, and I know it was kind of like, I imagine you watched the same, like, we bought the collector's edition Scream Factory
of course,
of it.
Yeah. I actually won it. Thank you, Scream Factory.
Oh, nice.
I purchased it, and then I won a copy of it about a month later. Thank you, Scream Factory / Shout Factory Instagram. We love you. We stan you. Follow.
But yeah, I was going to say, like, I know they promoted heavily that, on the bonus features, they had her, like, talking about the role. And I remember reading, like, that she kind of was, like, opening more up to it, to talk about it, which I feel always happens. People always try to distance themselves, and then it's kind of like the Jamie Lee Curtis thing, right? Eventually, they always come back.
Yeah, and I just...
Especially in a role like that, I feel like they come back because that was probably, like, ended up being the biggest role of their career.
Well, yes, exactly, and I feel like that's probably why, if she did distance herself a bit, because it was intensely iconic. Like,
maybe it's like you don't want to get typecasted.
No, absolutely. And you know what? I don't blame her, because she could have been that, like, mousy, like, horror girl.
Yeah.
Like...
Maybe it's more about that and less about, like, not liking that role.
Yeah, I think that's...
It copped her a Oscar nomination. Like, she can't hate it, obviously. Like, clearly, even though it's a horror movie, it gave her recognition.
So I think, too, that, I don't know if there'd be any argument from many people, but I guess they acknowledge, like, Carrie definitely is, up there on, like, iconic women of horror, like, as not just, like, a villain, but just, like, a character in general.
Would you really... I don't know I call her a villain.
She kills people, but she ain't no villain.
Well, and I was going to say, this is kind of the interesting...
Wouldn't she be like an anti-hero?
I was thinking more of an anti-hero. I think maybe the word villain, I've seen it in a couple, like, writings about the movie, but I think also, as horror people always root for the villain, so it might be, like...
I don't like this use of villain, because it just suggests that people are, like, purely evil. And I don't think anybody's purely evil. So
no, well, actually, one of my notes that I have on this movie...
Unless you're Dr. Loomis and you're talking about Michael Myers, then he is pure evil.
No, I don't think he's pure evil.
But what the great thing about this movie in particular that I noted was how nuanced everybody in it is. Like, there are people that you want to jump through the screen and wring their neck. You know what? Sometimes when John Travolta is slapping, or when she's slapping John Travolta, I'm on both of their sides. But, like, you look at her getting, Nancy Allen getting slapped in the car, and you're like, Jesus Christ, like, this is fucked. Like, and then I would think about it, and, like, and I don't always think about this, but sometimes I'll watch it, and I'll be like, man, like, I bet you $10, like, she's from this home where, like, maybe, like, there's abuse that runs rampant in there, like, maybe her mom gets abused, or maybe the kids do, and she kind of takes it, but then she also dishes it out, because she's... a nasty person, but, within 4 minutes on the screen, I go from, like, hating her to, like, feeling pity for her to hating her again, but everybody in it, like, same thing with, obviously, Sissy Spacek as Carrie, like, you always feel bad for her, but then it's like, she is killing people, but then you're like, they're also pieces of shit. And same thing with Sue Snell, you know what I mean? Like, yes, she went out of her way, she tried to redeem herself, and she wanted to help Carrie, but by helping Carrie, she was actually fucking her over because she was being patronizing and inserting her into this, like, situation that she was not socially or mentally prepared for, which ended up actually, getting a lot of people killed. And, same thing with Tommy. Like, I feel like he was a bit coerced into doing it, and then maybe he was doing it as a joke, and then maybe also he realized, hey, this girl's actually kind of cool, but everybody in it is just so nuanced. And, like, I mean, okay, we did not talk about Betty Buckley as Miss Collins.
Oh yes,
she is literally one of the reasons I keep watching this movie, because she is such a fucking underrated actress. Like, she is such a powerhouse. But same thing, like, and I think she knows that, and it's like in that scene in the principal's office when she's describing what happened and how they were total fucking assholes and bullied her, and she goes, but I know how they felt because I felt that way too. I wanted to, and she slapped her. She's like, I wanted to just wring her neck and go, it's just your period. Because people are like that, you might be a good person, but you want to, like, shake them at the same time.
And I was gonna say, it's an important thing to bring up, because, man, I thought, for anything that has not aged well in this movie, it was definitely the, like, domestic violence stuff is, like, very cringeworthy. And of course, with these kind of...
I feel like that was, like, a lot more common in movies back then.
Yeah, well, and I also saw it, too, is that, like, De Palma was, like, I feel like he was setting up kind of, like, that guy, like, this guy slapping her, like, he's a piece of shit, building that up so, when he dies, like, and he killed the pig, that kind of thing. So when he dies, it's like, you're like, yeah, you're rooting for the anti-villain.
I don't feel like that's intentional. I feel like it was just like, of course, it's still, like, very prevalent now, but it's more, like, in private. But, like, I feel like it was just, like, that was, like, common to see back then.
Do you know what I
think
found?
It was really like that.
I think you're right, actually. But that's what's so interesting about reading this movie is the, like, are we projecting our kind of 2019?
Yeah. We feel like he's a piece of shit.
Yeah. It was interesting to me because in the scene and when they're in the car and they're, like, arguing and, like, slapping and stuff. And
he's drinking and driving.
There's so much going on. Like, that scene alone you could write a paper on. Like, there's so much to unpack there. But I also found it interesting, maybe because I haven't watched it in a few years, and, like, there was a lot of interesting stuff about, like, consent, and she kept, like, saying no to him.
I know.
You know, and I was like, good for you, girl. I was looking at it, and I was like, you can be a dick sometimes, but he's also being a dick, but you know what? Like, you need to fucking consent to this shit just because you're sitting in his car, and she's, you know, maybe she's using it a bit to manipulate him, obviously, because that's part of her character is that she's manipulating him because she's very charismatic, right? Like,
yeah.
God damn, I was like, there's actually some subtle stuff going on with consent here that's weirdly ahead of its time.
It's true.
Yeah.
He didn't pay attention.
No.
And
he ended up dead. Well, so did she, but you know.
Me and Xylia also, while we were watching it, were amazed at Chris's ventriloquist skills.
Oh my god, yes. How do you keep saying his name? No, okay, I'm gonna throw this out there, and again, Scientology is gonna come and kidnap me. Every time I watch this movie, I think, how small is his joint that she can have it in her mouth and still keep saying his name over and over?
Perfectly clearly.
Also, how fixated is she that while she's sucking her boyfriend's dick, all she can think about is this other girl?
Yeah, that's true.
There's like, so many different layers.
There's a lot of wrinkles to this movie that, like, you could, like, it's a gift that keeps giving. Like, it never ages because it keeps getting better with age. It's like that cheese where it's like you can scrape the mold off and then it's like, oh my god, there's this fucking tasty shit that's been aging for like 30 years.
$100 a gram.
Yeah, exactly.
I do have one question, as I feel like we're getting towards your other question. Is telekinesis a miracle? Because she read about it in a book of miracles. A book about miracles.
But she read about it in a book of miracles because all she knew was that something she couldn't explain was a miracle because of her mother. Right?
Oh,
so she didn't look. She didn't look up telekinesis because she didn't know what telekinesis was. Because telekinesis is more of like an occult term, whereas it's something that happens to you that you can't explain. According to her mother, would be a miracle. So she came. It was kind of like a weird. Anyway, I don't know.
There was a book that she found about miracles that had a chapter about telekinesis in it.
Yes. But there are probably also other ones where it's like, this is an occult phenomenon, or this is like psychotic breaks, or...
She found it in the Jesus library.
I was just saying, I was very impressed with the small glimpses we got of their library. I think they were very well stocked for a high school library.
It was a very professional
It looked like the friggin' Munn library.
Yeah, I know. I was like, man, like the stacks here, I would have spent all my time in the stacks of that library. I'm like, I'm sorry.
Is there anything else we want to talk about for this movie? I feel like it's really, we should dedicate a 6-hour podcast.
Yes, we should. The last thing I want to say is that knowing, as we all do, teachers now, and how in a lot of cities they are essentially babysitters and can't do or say anything, or
this is true.
Give students proper grades,
or slap them in the face.
Or slap them. I'm not advocating that they do that, but when Miss Collins tells Norma to take her gum and she can choke on it, it's probably my favorite line in the whole movie because I legitimately, for that moment, wanted her to choke on that gum.
I know, the whole time I was like, wow, teachers can't say that stuff anymore.
Yeah, I feel that would never fly.
Maybe for the best.
Also, it's every time I watch this movie, I think about how, like I said, I watched it a few times when I was like in my early teens, and then we would watch it. Me and a couple of my friends would watch it a lot when we were teenagers, and when we would be like instant messaging each other or even just hanging out like in person, we constantly, like every line of Margaret White dialogue from this movie, we would say to each other.
That's amazing.
like I was just, when she's like, Eve was weak and the raven was called sin, we would just like get together and like say that shit to each other. So I thought it was so iconic because, you were talking about how much you loved Piper Laurie as Margaret White. And I was like, man, we were horror movie fanatics and we watched this movie a lot. And like, we would just quote that dialogue to each other constantly over and over. So it's, it lasts. It has a lasting impact.
As every teenager should for a good time.
Yes.
Just
Let's
quote Carrie.
Quote, insane, borderline. Well, no, not borderline. Actually homicidal evangelical.
Well, let's get to that last question. Is it scary? Xylia, we'll start with you.
I wasn't scared.
You look so tough when you said that. You're like, I ain't scared.
As I go and hide in a corner.
You look tough behind them bars.
I wasn't scared.
Straight to the point. Mike, how about you? Is it scary?
I find there are actually several moments of it that do really make my skin crawl. Like when you were talking about earlier, like when she's standing on stage covered in blood and like that dead look on her face, that she holds that for like 10 solid minutes, always, it just makes my hair stand on end. And it's partially the performance and the lighting and all that, but that actually does kind of scare me. But in general, no, but also kind of in light of the last, 10 years or so, the whole kind of idea behind it. And I think it's interesting that they don't teach Carrie in high schools as a regular literature.
Oh, they should.
They should, but like when you think about all of the like school violence and stuff that they have and the bullying, I'm like, there's actually a lot you can kind of learn from this. And in that way, in
they will kill you with their telekinesis.
Yes. But I mean, like when you get to that point in your life and you see all the violence happening and all of the terrorizing of other students and sort of like what they're doing to themselves and then what they're doing to other people. And like, to me, this is a scary movie because it was one of the first things to interrogate the effects of like that fishbowl of that like powder keg fishbowl of fucking insane teenage hormones and like the hierarchy of I need to be on top, so I need to push somebody else down so I can climb over them. Yeah. And then the effects that it has both on the people who are doing the climbing and the people who are pushed down.
Being climbed upon.
Exactly. And I just think that it doesn't get enough credit for that. And it just shocks me the last few, like 5 or 6 years that this work, both as a book and a film, is not discussed more in that context.
Yeah,
I know,
that's a good point.
But again, and it's very thorny issue, and it's like, do you read this and like a lot of people would probably see like what Carrie does as glorifying violence, right? So but to me, this is like brilliant in a way to teach because it actually opens up a dialogue and a discussion because it is very, very nuanced. There's just so many reads you can take on it, but again, you also like have this like mass banning of like anything that is even slightly controversial. So
yeah, it's true. No, but that would be perfect because if you read in like English class or whatever, it's not like you don't discuss the content that you're reading.
Exactly. Like that's the whole point.
They talk about it. Yeah.
So my thoughts on if it was scary, I don't think it was necessarily scary, but I did think De Palma did an amazing job setting up tension and suspense, like Mike said, with the infamous blood splatter scene, and especially as someone that has never seen the full movie before, like the ending I thought was great because I did not know like her hand came out of the ground. I had no inclination that would happen. So I was like, oh, that's awesome. So yeah, I don't think it was scary, but definitely suspenseful. So are you guys ready to go in the rating this?
I will rate it.
Okay, so we're gonna rate it, but first, so I just wanted to give everyone a heads up to follow us on all our social media. It Slays Podcast on Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Twitter. I don't even know what else there is. But
whatever it is, we're on
Spotify.
it.
Whatever it is, we're on it. Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Follow us. Obviously we post stuff about the episodes coming out, but we also post other stuff. So I posted an article about femininity in horror movies.
It didn't work, but...
Well, it did for a bit, and then
okay.
it got torn down.
Maybe we'll repost it.
And we post other stuff, memes, and horror-related memes, and pictures on Instagram. Xylia's been working hard at that. But yeah, just make sure to follow... Real hard. Make sure to follow us on all the social media. Also, if you get a chance, make sure to go to Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts now, and give us a rating. Just because your ratings help us come up in the search engine higher. We are more likely to be seen if you rate us. And also leave a comment for rating, because we'd love to hear what you think of the show. So let's get back and rate this. Okay, guys, so rating it. We'll start with Xylia.
Yes. I give this movie a slay.
Oh, jeez.
I am
Mike's got a smile.
Shook. I am shook.
I'm
glad.
shook
I don't
too.
know. I'm not going
I
to say
can't
you're
remember
a
the last
curmudgeon,
slay
but-
you gave.
What? What did you say? I'm a curmudgeon?
I said I'm not going to say you're a curmudgeon, but...
I can't remember the last slay you gave.
No, I love it. I love that she slayed this.
Maybe Evil Dead?
I can't remember.
I can't remember.
Because I reserve it for special movies. Unlike
It's true.
you.
It's true. Some of us, I have been literally called out by 9-year-olds for loving everything too much.
Exactly.
So I understand. I understand.
The people need explanation. You can't just leave it on slay.
It's like every movie that I give a slay. I don't know. You can start a broader conversation, like social conversation about it. It's like, even if it wasn't meant to be at the time, like, I think it's like a feminist classic in terms of horror movie.
Yeah.
It was really well done. Yeah.
Okay.
Plus all the other things I said in the middle of this podcast.
All right, well, I'm going to go next. I also am going to give it a slay. I went in fully expecting to not give it a slay. I said, mate, I'm going to feel bad not giving it a slay, but I don't know how good this is really going to be. And then having watched it in its entirety, I loved it. I couldn't wait to talk about it on the podcast. Everything from the look, the acting. We didn't really bring it up in the body of this podcast, but I thought the soundtrack was hilarious. Because there's a lot of, like, cheesy 70s porn type music going on, but then, like, a serious score. It was just, I loved everything about this movie. Like Xylia said, you can start a broader conversation, you can read it on so many levels, and I see why it's an iconic film now. So, a slay from me. Let's go to Mike.
I mean, I think we all know that this has slayed my entire life, and it's one of the most formative pieces of art that I've ever encountered, the book and the movie. So, I mean, slay all day. Like, this is
unanimous slays.
It's unanimous. It really was one of the probably 4 or 5 pieces of film that I encountered when I was a youngster that really molded my aesthetic and kind of like showed me what horror could be, and it really just affected me, like you said, in the way that, like, anybody who watches it when they're youngster and they feel like an outsider, you sympathize with it to a certain degree, not necessarily telekinetic powers and murdering everybody, but sometimes you want to. So I just think that it has use in many different ways in many different areas.
Yeah, I 100% agree. So let's get into the budget game. We all know how it works. We'll start with you, Mike. How much do you think this cost to make?
I'm gonna say $6 million.
$6 million. Xylia.
I'm gonna say $1.2 million.
Listen, buys my grasp on money, as anybody who knows me personally will tell you, is so out of whack.
I never have any idea.
Okay.
So Xylia is gonna take it. It cost $1.8 million to make.
Inflation, like, hello, I want to know how much that would be today.
Yeah, really.
No, they brought it up on the special features, and they said when they were telling the story that it was $1.8 million to make then.
Yeah, so he's wondering with inflation what it would be
I have
today.
no idea what it would be.
That's fine. We don't need to do the, like, economic math of it all. I'm fine with being bested by X. I always am.
We know you're more comfortable with being bested than Xylia is.
Yes.
Well,
what does that even mean?
That means that I'm a masochist. Is what that means.
So let's get into what it made. And an interesting tidbit about what it made, when one of the first people to screen this movie at the time was a very young Steven Spielberg.
I fucking knew you were going to say Spielberg. I knew it.
And Spielberg apparently almost guessed to the dot how much money this movie was gonna make in the theater. So, Xylia, how much money do you think it made?
I think it made $6.7 million.
Okay. And Mike?
18 to 20.
Mike is gonna take this. So, he is pumped about this.
I'm literally fist pumping right now.
It made $33.8 million.
And I wasn't even close.
I can't remember off the top of my head, but I believe they said that Spielberg said it was going to make somewhere between $30 and $36 million when he saw it. He said there's no way it will make less than that.
Yeah, anything that Spielberg kind of gives any blessing to, is going to make a few bucks. Especially back then.
I'd just like to come in with some economic information here.
Sure.
So, Mike was wondering, I put in my guess 1.8. I'll let you guys know.
Well, it is 1.8.
Yeah, I put in 1.2. So.
Oh.
Okay, so in today's money, with inflation, $1.8 million in 1976 would actually be just over $8.1 million today. That is a 351.2% cumulative rate of inflation. Just to let you know, that should be scary to you.
But what you should take from it, Mike, is that if we were talking about today's money,
I would have won. Yes, okay. Fair. That's all I want. I just want to know that.
Just give it to him.
How much she can have it in the theater?
So it made $33.8 million.
Okay, I'll tell you how much that is. So in today's money, that would be just over $152.5 million. Oh,
wow.
So very, very well received. Obviously, it got its Oscar nods. I thought a fun tidbit to add into this section would be a fun fact about Stephen King. So this was Stephen King's first book, I guess, if you can call it that. They did talk about on the Scream Factory special features that the story originally was in his trash can because he threw it out and his wife pulled it out, read it, and basically Stephen King added all this stuff to the book because it wasn't long enough to be a novel, and so he had to add stuff like newspaper clippings.
I was going to say, I feel like that's the, because when I first read it when I was like 12 years old, I found it very confusing because it does have large sections where it's just like kind of a traditional prose novel, but then they're interspersed with newspaper clippings and clippings from like books that people who lived through the massacre wrote. And at the time, I obviously, at 12 years old, I could not understand what this was. And it was very jarring to kind of like have that like kind of mixed media approach to it. And then when I read it, years later, I was like, oh, okay, this makes so much more sense now. But it's also cool because it kind of breaks it up and gives it like it pulls it out of that, like, just focusing on Carrie, and then it kind of, like, pulls it out and goes, hey, there were other people involved with this whole experience,
Well, and I thought I was bringing that up because, so not only was this his first novel, but it was his first movie adaptation, and he actually only got paid $2,500 for the rights, which he says he doesn't regret. He said he loved this movie, and it led to him, you know, probably being the most adapted author of all time.
Yeah, and when you look at it, this is still rightfully cited as, like, when you look at the canon of Stephen King works that have been adapted to film, it's voluminous, and a good 50 to 60% of it is garbage, and this is in the, like, 1%, like, no movie critic, no lay film watcher is going to disagree that this isn't, you know, one of the, like, 3 or 4 best Stephen King adaptations or best horror movies. So, obviously, why would he have an issue with getting paid whatever when he has made billions of dollars over the years? He can't possibly look back on this and go, I wish I got paid more for that. No, it actually, like, was one of the first adaptations, if not the first. It might have been the first. I don't know. I'm trying to think of the timeline of, like, Salem's Lot and stuff, but, like, goddamn, like, it actually gave you cred, you know, like.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think we can announce our next episode, and people are actually going to get a double header because it is someone's birthday for that episode.
Some queen that we know.
That's right. Someone who's commonly known as a cheater on this podcast.
Oh my god.
Do you know who that is, Xylia?
Yeah, it's me.
Yeah. So, Xylia, we got our birthday picks for film, so it's only right Xylia gets one. We're not going to lie to the listeners. We kind of skipped her, and then Xylia said, hey, everyone else got a pick, but I didn't get a pick. So, we had to make that right.
Yeah, what's up with that, guys?
Yeah, jeez.
Stop treating me like the Carrie.
Typical men.
Yeah.
So, Xylia, do you want to announce?
Yep, I'm very excited. We're going to be reviewing Mandy.
That is right. Nicolas
Cage. Add that to the Nicolas Cage list.
Mandy.
It's going to be backdoor pilot for a new podcast.
Yeah.
On Nicolas Cage. Yeah.
Episode 1 is our episode on Mandy.
Crossover.
And I figure this is a good time also to just bring up our Patreon quickly. If you want to be a horror hound with the rest of us, go to www.patreon.com/itslayspodcast. We have a bunch of different tiers, from $1 to $30. At the $5 mark, if you're thinking, man, you know what movie I hate? Mandy. Well, guess what? If you are a $5 Patreon subscriber, you get to pick a movie, and then we are forced to watch it.
And by forced, he means we're going to love it.
Or at least pretend to love it. Or if you're Xylia, you'll just rate it terribly like you rate most movies.
Yeah.
Someone's got to be an actual critic, okay?
Exactly.
That's right. So again, www.patreon.com/itslayspodcast and check out all the cool perks. But I think that is everything for this episode. We definitely came into this episode saying, man, we got to get up early in the morning after recording this, so we need to make this not a super long episode. And I think we've done just that. But, Carrie, I think it was worth it. I think it was definitely worth it.
Always.
So, as always, I am Rowan.
Bye, it's Xylia, and Juicy says bye.
And this is Mike, and I'm saying goodbye, Juicy.